Tonight on Rock Center, hundreds, perhaps thousands of parents told by the people they trusted most that their newborns died at birth. But what really happened to all those children?
Nobody buried with that name.
Absolutely no.
And what does that mean to you?
Has to be alive.
Your son is alive.
We have a son somewhere out there.
A Rock Center exclusive tonight. For the first time, we hear from the man at the center of a story so many people have been following. It happened on opening day at Dodger Stadium. It was a fight, it turned ugly, and it almost cost a San Francisco Giants fan his life.
It makes me so mad when people say it's just Dodger Stadium. I go to games all over the country, 50 stadiums a year, from coast to coast, and it's everywhere. This violence is increasing everywhere.
Also tonight, the man they called the Dear Leader is dead in North Korea. And the question is, will this change anything in that very strange place? And with us in the studio here tonight, Steve Martin, known around the world for comedy, of course. He is a very serious musician, nominated for another Grammy. And before we go tonight, the rink out our back door is celebrating a major life event. Rock Center gets underway right now. Good evening and welcome to Rock Center. And as you watch our lead story tonight, imagine unearthing such a thing. Thousands of families who are at first told the nightmarish news that their infant child had died during childbirth. But then years later, one by one, they unearth evidence that the whole thing might have been a lie. That's exactly what thousands of families in Spain are going through as the unimaginable slowly comes to light. It went on for decades, apparently, and doctors, clergy, even the government all appear to have played some sort of a role. Kate Snow went to Spain to investigate how it is that children were stolen at birth.
In Madrid, Spain, this year has been a momentous one for Luis Vega and his daughter Ana. They're searching for someone they've never met, trying to piece together what really happened back in 1977. The Vegas were a young family then with one little boy. Luis's wife, Ines, was pregnant and in labor. Luis was in the waiting room. And a nurse comes out
And tell me, hi, sir, there are two coming. I started to think, I got two.
Twins. There was Ana and a baby boy. But soon after their birth, the doctor came out with terrible news.
The boy is dead. I recommend you not to see him.
Because it would be too jarring to see the body?
Yeah.
Do you remember your feelings in that moment?
I mean, I couldn't react. I couldn't say anything. I mean, I felt frozen.
Every year on Ana's birthday, Luis and Ines talked about her twin, the boy they lost. But then this year, the Vegas heard something that made them think, for the first time, their child may be alive. For years, there had been whispers, but now an unbelievable story was exploding in the press. Allegations that, for decades, organized networks stole newborn babies from their mothers and sold the babies to other families. Back in January, more than 250 families filed cases with Spain's Attorney General demanding investigations. The number has grown since. Today, nearly 1,500 cases have been filed. This is a famous documentary. If anyone is responsible for prompting all this, it's documentary filmmaker and author Montse Armengol, who was among the very first to report systematic baby stealing. You've investigated this for so many years. Can you say without a doubt that babies were stolen in Spain?
From the 40s until 80s as a minimum, we can talk about children that were kidnapped from their families, from their mothers.
Stolen babies, niños robados.
Niños robados.
Armengol and her team found the practice began after fascist dictator Francisco Franco seized power during Spain's civil war of the late 1930s. The government would remove children from mothers who were political prisoners and give them to families who supported the regime.
All this started like a political repression.
But then it goes over the years from being a political thing to really being economic, to being a business.
Yes.
Money starts to change hands.
Yes, yes.
Large sums, thousands of dollars were paid for the babies. Spain was an ultra-conservative society dominated by the Catholic Church, and nuns or doctors were often key players. And who's getting that money? The nuns? The doctors? The church?
Little by little, all together.
All of them?
Yes, all of them.
It's the Vegas' greatest fear that the son they believed had died was actually sold. The more they questioned what happened in 1977, the more they realized how little they knew. Luis Vega says the doctors told him they'd take care of all the funeral arrangements for his baby boy. They said the family shouldn't get involved. It would be too upsetting. He assumed that the baby would be buried here in Madrid's main cemetery. But 3 decades later, when he requested documents and records from that time, he was stunned by what he found out. What did you get back from the cemetery?
No fetus.
Nobody buried with that name?
Absolutely no. This is the confirmation from the cemetery.
And what does that mean to you?
Has to be alive.
Your son is alive.
We have a son somewhere out there.
Luis hired a detective who managed to get a list of every boy born in Madrid on November 20th, 1977. There are 61 names, and he's been going door to door trying to track them all down. Why is this so important to you right now?
I don't want him to think why my real parents abandoned me.
You don't want him to feel abandoned?
No.
You want him to know that he was loved?
Absolutely.
Maria Luisa Torres has a deep understanding of the Vegas story. In 1982, she was the mother of a 2-year-old and separated from her husband when she became pregnant by another man, something unacceptable in Spain at that time. Even as late as the 1980s, babies born out of wedlock were often taken and placed with families of higher social standing. It wasn't only about money, it was seen as a moral good. But Maria Luisa had other ideas. What were you thinking about your future?
My plan was to go ahead with a pregnancy and keep my baby.
When Maria Luisa arrived at the hospital, a nun who'd promised to help her presided over the birth. She had no idea that that help was about to turn into a nightmare.
They anesthetized me. They put me to sleep completely.
You slept through the whole thing.
I wasn't aware of a thing.
Maria Luisa says when she woke up, the nun told her her baby daughter had died. She didn't believe it, so she snuck out of her room and saw her newborn sleeping in the nursery. She says when she demanded her baby, the nun threatened her.
She said, either you shut up and don't ask any more questions, or I'll take both your children from you, and you'll go to jail. Blackmail.
She felt helpless. She says against her will, the baby was given up for adoption. Were you thinking of her all those years?
Always. Something was missing. Like a piece of me was missing.
I was born March 31st, 1982.
On the other side of Madrid, Pilar Alcalde always knew she'd been adopted, but never dreamt she was stolen. Until one day this year, she saw a TV show about the controversy that put a knot in her stomach.
There were mothers on the show who said things like, I didn't abandon you, I've been looking for you. And I knew right then, from the bottom of my heart, I was a stolen child.
A television station investigating the scandal uncovered the details of Pilar's birth and made the connection to a woman who had a baby on the same day at the same place, Maria Luisa Torres. Could Pilar be her stolen baby? Both women gave DNA samples and then met for the first time on a live television broadcast, waiting for confirmation. Did the DNA match?
Ha llegado el momento. ¡Sí, son
Mother and daughter reunited after 30 years.
I jumped up and hugged her as though I'd known her my whole life. It was beautiful.
It was a miracle. I have feelings of happiness because I found her. but above all, feelings of rage and hatred.
Hatred for the nun she accuses of stealing her little girl. We went to the convent where the nun lives, but she declined to talk to us. Spain's government hasn't talked to her either, even though she's been implicated in dozens of cases. In fact, among all the hundreds of cases filed across Spain, no one has yet been charged with a crime. The Spanish government told us prosecuting the alleged crimes is extremely difficult because they took place so long ago. Many suspects are already dead. But in some cases, like the Vegas, there are people involved who are still around. Vega's lawyer has advised him not to confront the doctor he believes stole his child, a doctor still living in Madrid. What would you say to him?
You're a bastard. Son of a bitch. It's the best name I can tell you.
Do you think justice will ever be done?
No. No. This bastard has taken our life.
Yet Luis Vega is still hopeful, convinced his family's story will have an ending like the one Maria Luisa and Pilar have. And like a lot of Spaniards, they're still searching, unafraid to face the dark mysteries of their country's past.
Kate, I was just going to ask why they felt compelled to reveal the paternity test in a game show format. Then I realized it's a minor industry here in the United States as well. It's so the motive was part moral, part financial, but you say hundreds of claims going back to the 1940s. That means there are grandchildren that people don't know about.
No, that's right, that's right. And to this point, 1,500 cases filed. There are many who believe there could be tens of thousands of cases out there, but proving them is so incredibly difficult. So far, only a handful of people have found each other in the way that Maria Luisa and Pilar did. That's very rare.
And we know it is a big story in Spain. It'll probably prompt other countries to do the same thing, other families to ask questions. Thank you for bringing it to us. Kate Snow here with us in the studio. Up next, it sounds like the opening line of a joke. A couple of Muslim American comedians walk into a bar in the Deep South to do stand-up comedy. But it's a real story, and it's funny and serious at the same time. And later, a Rock Center exclusive here tonight. He's become known as the Dodger Stadium beating victim. How did things get so off the hook that he ended up in a coma after a baseball game? Tonight, you'll hear him speak for the first time. Welcome back. 9/11 changed everything in this country, and in the months and years since, life sure is different for a lot of Muslim Americans. Just today, in fact, two men, both Muslim, sued Delta Airlines, claiming they were thrown off a flight from Memphis to Charlotte earlier this year simply because of their beards and traditional clothing. Delta, for its part, insists it opposes discrimination in any form. There are all sorts of serious efforts to promote understanding, but not a whole lot of stand-up comedy on the topic until recently. Tonight, Harry Smith introduces us to an effort to use humor to deal with a topic that has often been no laughing matter.
Dean Obadiah, everybody.
Is there really anything funny about being a Muslim in America these days?
And it could be more challenging for us. They could give hurricanes Muslim names. That wouldn't help.
Dean Obadiah thinks so.
Turn on the news, Hurricane Mahmoud is coming. Run for your life, Mahmoud's a killer.
Dean is a comedian. He's also a Muslim, born in America.
A lot of Americans hate you.
I'm not sure how many actually hate me, but I know what you're getting at. The only way I know to counter it is by reaching out to people and trying to dispel the misconceptions, the lack of facts they have about American Muslims, about the religion itself.
We went along as Dean and fellow American Muslim comedians Nagin Farsid, Omar Elba, and Maysoon Zayed toured across the American South. In comedy clubs,
You just need to trust me.
on the streets,
How you doing, ma'am?
and in chance encounters,
The loudest voice.
doing their best to try to win friends and influence people. Pilgrims armed with punchlines in hopes of shattering a few stereotypes. They called their tour, The Muslims Are Coming. Nearly half of all Americans admit to feeling some prejudice toward Muslims. In a funny way, the comics are fighting for their civil rights.
If I was alive during the civil rights struggle, would I have come down to the South with the Freedom Riders? Would I have come down here and fought for other people's rights? I think I would have come down here during the civil rights movement.
Hey, we're having a show tonight, tomorrow night. You're amazing for coming here on a Thursday night and seeing us.
The shows were free, and everywhere they went, they played to a packed house.
There's a TV on. And the guy goes to me, "You see these freaking Arabs on TV?" Just kind of scary conversation started. I go, "Yes." He goes, "I have an idea. Let's kill them all and let God sort out the good and bad ones." I'm like, "Sir, that's not nice. I'm Arab." He goes, "You don't freaking look it." I'm like, "Well, that just makes it easier for me to achieve the goals of my mission."
Turns out American Muslims resent the terrorists as much, if not more, than the rest of us.
We hate terrorism. We hate them as much as you. In fact, I will argue we hate them more because we suffer a backlash for their sins.
Town after town, the stand-ups hit the streets to interact with the locals. In Lawrenceville, Georgia, they were met largely with indifference.
Ask a Muslim a question. If you have any questions, ma'am, if you have any questions about Islam, not to join, just about us. We're not trying to get you to join.
But a few folks gave them an earful.
One thing that I don't understand, you're dressed like an American.
Yeah, I am an American.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm an American Iranian.
You know, there's only one kind of American, and that's American.
Yeah, I mean, I was born here, I grew up here.
My ancestors are from Holland, but I don't claim to be a Dutch American.
Right.
I'm an American American. If you want to be mainstream, you know, then you're no longer an Iranian Muslim. You're an American.
What they heard time after time was this: why don't American Muslims do more to denounce terrorism?
Why are there not more voices being brought to the forefront criticizing the Muslims who are being extreme?
It's no joke. Deep in the Bible Belt, the comics contrived a little quiz.
People in Birmingham, come play a game with us. Name that religion. You can win prizes.
If anyone says, "I love God," but hates the brothers or sisters, he is a liar. Whoever loves God must also love the brothers and sisters. Old Testament, New Testament, or the Quran?
I would go with either Old Testament or Quran. I would go with Quran on that one.
New Testament.
New Testament. There's not a whole lot of difference between the three in some cases.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. That's maybe the point we're trying to make. Okay, everybody. Hey guys, you want to play?
Polite, congenial.
There's prizes.
The comedian street antics were received with Southern hospitality.
God bless.
Thank you.
But on the web, they were vilified. The hatred flowed freely. Islam was called the scourge of the planet, and worse.
I'll tell you, it takes a real confident bigot to say something to your face. They'll yell it in a car driving by. They'll post on the internet all day.
Terry Jones is like,
I suddenly feel like I know why my parents came here and gave me these set of opportunities, because I'm supposed to do something with it.
There is emotion there.
No, I'm just tired.
I don't think so. I wonder if the people who dislike you so much know how much you love the country you live in.
Look at this turnout.
Hopefully we'll be able to communicate that just a little bit.
Maybe I'm delusional, but I love the fact that we're trying. This is our calling to go out there and do this. And I think we're making a difference, little by little.
And perhaps the best way the comics can do that is by laughing at themselves.
Remember this slogan: dress white, make your flight. Dress brown, never leave town.
So here we are. We've been at war overseas for a decade. We've watched the last two presidents do things like sign guest books at mosques in Washington. There have been pamphlets and public service announcements. For your money, do you think this is as good a public education idea as any? Did it work?
It certainly was working where we saw it. On the other hand, the folks that they encountered on the street were not swayed much. The people who showed up at the comedy shows were moderates to progressives. There were people who wanted to hear what the comics had to say, maybe to try and influence those who were on a farther fringe, who were really, you know, consumed with a kind of hatred. They may never get through on that level.
And of course, now they are a Harry Smith story on Rock Center. So that opens up a whole new...
Perhaps.
I'm in there trying, pal.
I would say this, honestly, they're motivated in an almost naive and spectacular way. Because what they were really trying to do is, even if they could just convince a few people that they're in many ways the same as they are, that's what they're really trying to do.
Naive and spectacular actually go well together. Thank you very much, as always.
A pleasure.
And Merry Christmas. When we come back, a couple of recent developments we thought needed more attention, including an actual reason to pay careful note to the following commercials, and then join us again, please, on the other side. We are back, and as we try to do on occasion, we want to take a look at a few things that might have slipped by us of late, and a different look at some of what's been in the news, beginning with one thing. The late and thoroughly repressive North Korean dictator actually did pretty well. The thing about an absolute maximum leader is they do big events very well. A sea of people, all syncopated, coordinated, adulation guaranteed. It's not like they're missing work. This is their job, and it's not like they have a choice. And that's the thing about repressive dictators who are willing to watch their own people starve. They can turn out a crowd because it's what they do. It's why few people believed the grieving pictures from North Korea today. The crying was too dramatic, too emphatic. They seemed too aware of the camera, too much on cue. The death of Kim Jong-il certainly injects an element of uncertainty as the year draws to a close. We also want to remember some folks who made life in America more interesting.
It's incredible, but I feel like a criminal because I don't take money.
If you saw the movie Serpico, then you know something about the mess New York was in during the 70s. And that's where Patrick Murphy came in. As New York's police commissioner, he rooted out bad cops and stopped a lot of corruption. He'd been a cop like his father was. He had walked a beat and later climbed to the top of his trade. Some say he was the best in a half century. Patrick Murphy was 91.
He won't need it. He hates everything. He likes it. Hey, Mikey.
It was a beloved commercial from that same era, the early 70s, and while it was selling a new cereal called Life, it was so true to life that it made the copywriter famous in the ad world. She was Edie Stevenson, a mother of 4, including 3 boys, a lot like Mikey. She wrote ads for Smirnoff and VW and Cutty Sark in the Shank of the Mad Men era, but her spot lives on. It's on everyone's list of top 10 commercials of all time. Edie Stevenson was 81. She's survived by her family members and her cat named, what else? Mikey. And you know how the commercials that air constantly threaten to ruin a perfectly good song? In this case, that song in those Viagra ads is Smokestack Lightning, and that guitar riff was played by Hubert Sumlin. Originally from Deep South Mississippi, he became one of the great bluesmen of all time. He lived just long enough to see his ranking in Rolling Stone just this month among the 100 greatest guitarists in history. And he got to hear his music play whenever a middle-aged guy with the perfect amount of stubble was either fixing a sailboat or filling a hot radiator and then celebrated by heading home to have sex. The great Hubert Sumlin was 80 years old. Tim Tebow is now a noun and a verb because of his now famous prayerful post-touchdown poses on the field. Everybody's doing it. YouTube is full of people Tebowing. And Saturday Night Live had its own What Would Jesus Do About Tebow sketch this past weekend.
But just take it down a notch, will you, buddy?
Yes, Lord, whatever you command.
Lego's in the news, first for the all-Lego depiction of the famous photo of the night they got bin Laden, but also for a new product line called Lego Friends. There's the smart girl, the diva, the social girl, the beautician, a lot of it under attack on the web and on Twitter for perpetuating gender stereotypes.
The good girl.
Petunia isn't talking, but listen to the story of this dog. One night back when she was a puppy in Northern Virginia, her owners let her out after dinner to do what dogs do, but Petunia disappeared for 8 years until a woman near Sacramento noticed a stray, brought it to a shelter. Petunia's back home in Virginia, and all's forgiven. And good news for us TV viewers. The FCC is finally going to do something about the commercials that are so much louder than what you're trying to watch on
16 hours.
Excuse me, I'm trying to. Can you lower the volume? Thank you. I was just trying to say it's gotten so bad and there have been so many complaints about loud commercials. The feds are stepping in starting next year to ride herd on the volume. There are currently no federal rules governing how many times they're allowed to play the same song, however. And by the way, we have an update tonight on the story Chelsea Clinton brought us here on Rock Center a week ago tonight. As you'll recall, it was about a woman they call Miss Dove, Annette Dove of Pine Bluff, Arkansas, who has made it her life's work to make a difference in the lives of thousands of children there, feeding them, keeping them in school, out of trouble, and generally on the right track. We wanted to let you know after we aired the story, the folks who saw it, our viewers, decided they wanted to give, and they did. Just over $200,000 to Miss Dove's program, from $5 amounts into the thousands. She says she's got an email from around the world. Just today, a church group from Siloam Springs, Arkansas, sent a truck full of toys for the kids Miss Dove looks after. And a bit later on in the broadcast, after a break, comedian, author, and musician Steve Martin is here. We'll talk to him about the two foremost passions in his life right now. But up next here tonight, a story of struggle, recovery, and outrage. It's how opening day at a Dodgers game got so out of hand that a young man was left in a coma. Tonight, he speaks out for the first time. Welcome back. If you're a sports fan, you know this well. If you wear, just to name an example, a Yankees jersey to Fenway Park in Boston, or wear a Boston Red Sox jersey to the Bronx, there will be consequences. At minimum, verbal abuse, maybe a 16-ounce beer you weren't planning on wearing, and sometimes worse. Well, we may have a whole new definition of worse. This story is about a San Francisco Giants fan who wore his game shirt to Dodgers Stadium for opening day this year. By the end of the day, he was in a coma. A lot of people have been following his story ever since. Tonight, you will hear him speak and hear details of the attack for the first time. Dr. Nancy Snyderman reports on the game gone wrong.
It was opening day of the 2011 baseball season at Dodger Stadium in Los Angeles.
He does more than pull a ground ball.
The Dodgers were playing their longtime rivals, the San Francisco Giants. 55,000 fans piled in to celebrate an all-American rite of spring. In a sea of Dodger blue, a small group of friends, Giants fans, stood out in their orange and black jerseys. One of them was Brian Stowe, a paramedic and doting father. No one could imagine that trip to the ballpark would leave Brian like this, unable to walk, barely able to talk, and a third of his brain destroyed. His close-knit family was shaken to the core. Brian's father, Dave.
What's happened to Brian is so serious and daily breaks your heart to think about it.
Brian's friends Corey Maciel and Jeff Bradford sat down with me for their first television interview to give their account of that night when they say they walked into the parking lot after the game and were jumped by two Dodgers fans.
That's when Brian, from behind, got punched in the face, in the side of the head, excuse me. He was punched with a haymaker in the side of the head.
Where you see a haymaker?
It was a running, huge, sweeping punch.
So a sucker punch from behind?
Yeah. And first thing that hit the ground was the back of his head. And I watched his head bounce off the asphalt and heard it.
And what did you hear?
Just the crack. Just that I don't know how to, a crack or a thud, just that sound of bone hitting asphalt.
As Brian lay motionless on the ground, Corey and Jeff say the assailants kicked him in the head over and over again.
Jeff and I actually got to him right about the same time and jumped on top of him, covered him up. And, you know, I'm pleading just for these guys to stop.
There was a thug culture at Dodger Stadium.
Bill Plaschke, a columnist with the Los Angeles Times, has been covering professional sports for 3 decades.
And it was just horrendously scary there, and it had gotten scarier. You couldn't look at people the wrong way at concession stand lines. You had to be careful who you cheered for. We saw it come when you could see there was fights almost every night. It was not a surprise Brian Stowe was beaten, and it was not a surprise that it was a Dodger fan beating a guy in a Giant jersey. It was not a surprise, either one of those, and that was the most horrible thing about it. And we were so angry because everyone who was there and everyone who'd ever been to Dodger Stadium saw this coming.
And as these YouTube videos show, it's no longer unusual to see fights in the stands and parking lots at baseball stadiums across the country. This fight took place 2 years ago in Dodger Stadium parking lot not far from where Brian was attacked. And on the night of Brian's beating, he clearly sensed the menacing atmosphere. He sent this text to a friend: "It's effing scary here." 2 hours later, he was in the hospital fighting for his life.
Very good. Okay, now.
When I visited Brian almost 9 months after the attack, he was able to hold a very simple conversation.
Hi. I'm Nancy.
Hello.
How are you?
Fine.
I've heard so much about you.
How are you?
I'm doing very well, thank you.
That's good.
You're just as handsome as your sister said you are.
I want you to move your hand across your body.
After spending 7 months in the intensive care unit, much of that time in a medically induced coma, Brian was transferred to this special rehabilitation center in San Jose, California. This day, he is able to write his name, something he couldn't do a month earlier.
Nicely done.
The beating most severely damaged the frontal lobes of Brian's brain, the area that controls decision-making, planning, and personality.
He was a little confused.
And every day, Brian's mother, Ann, father, Dave, and sisters Bonnie and Aaron search for traces of the old Brian.
I see you smiling. What are you thinking about?
He was fun. He was funny. He was always kidding the girls when they were growing up.
He's always had the same sense of humor since he was little. And it's quirky, but, you know, it's almost infectious where everybody kind of just wants to be around him.
Now surrounded by therapists 3 hours a day, 6 days a week, Brian is working to relearn everything from brushing teeth to swallowing. He is fed through a tube and needs round-the-clock care.
But right now, we'll go in tomorrow, and he could be different than he was today. He may not be as coherent and as receptive to what we're saying to him.
So it's day by day?
Oh, day by day.
It is.
Sometimes he's looking right at me and talking to me, and then sometimes there's no eye contact, or you wonder, does he really understand what I'm telling him?
Some have said Brian's beating was an isolated incident, but Bill Plaschke says that's not the case.
It makes me so mad when people say it's just Dodger Stadium. I go to games all over the country, 50 stadiums a year from coast to coast, and it's everywhere. This violence is increasing everywhere.
In Brian's case, the police eventually arrested Luis Sanchez and Marvin Norwood, charging them with multiple counts of assault. They have pled not guilty and are now awaiting a preliminary hearing. The Stowe family is suing the Dodgers, saying they failed to ensure the safety of fans attending the game. The Dodgers have increased police presence at the park and have improved the lighting in the parking lot, but they deny the Stowe's claims that security has ever been lax, saying that the night Brian was beaten, there were 195 police on duty and 233 security personnel, including off-duty officers.
What are you hoping to obtain?
We just want Brian and his children to be taken care of. Brian's medical care now is in the millions of dollars, and it's going to be a long road.
Doctors say Brian's speech and mobility may improve, but they expect him to be permanently disabled. His family cherishes the positive moments while hoping for more.
Now we can walk into a room and his therapist will be there and say, Brian, who just walked into the room? And he'd turn and he said, my mom and dad. You know, oh my God, you know, that's awesome.
I tell you, I'm no expert, but I'm a sports fan. I go to a lot of games, and my theory is that the beer-testosterone combination makes a kind of jet fuel among people. In your specialty as a medical doctor, I'm tempted to ask you, when will it all come back? What will come back? But then covering Gabby Giffords, we learned no to injuries.
Well, if you look at Gabby Giffords as sort of the best scenario where it was a clear trajectory, Brian's a very different case where it's going to be a much longer strike. But I think you touched on something. Half-price beer, lax security, people looking the other way, a thug culture. The reality is, whether Brian wants to be sort of the new face of this, there has to be we have to be serious about this. Major League Baseball does not require keeping up with tabs about isolated incidents, so the numbers are really quite squishy. But I've heard this word epidemic a lot. It is time to get serious about this nonsense in the stands.
And also, I'm glad we had the sports writer to say, you know, he gets angry when he hears it's just Dodger Stadium, because I'm here to tell you it is
That's right.
not.
It's everywhere. And this family wants him to be taken care of. It's not a family looking for vengeance. It's a family that wants to tell this story and set things right.
Thanks, Doc. Look forward to your next story.
Brian.
Thanks for visiting us. Our next guest, and when you put it this way, it could only be one guy: comic genius, a fixture on Twitter, and a banjo hero. And then a bit later on, it wouldn't be the holidays without the famous rink out back here at Rockefeller Center. Now in its 75th year, a special look coming up. And welcome back. There may be no entertainer alive who lights up as many different components of our brains as Steve Martin.
I anticipated it.
He's an actor, he's a comedian, he's an author, he's an essayist, and he is a first-rate Grammy Award-winning musician. His latest CD, Rare Bird Alert, which he recorded with the Steep Canyon Rangers, has been nominated for a Grammy for Best Bluegrass Album. It would be his second Grammy. That would be nice. We're happy to welcome him and his banjo to our couch. Thank you for coming.
It would actually be my 5th Grammy, but third for bluegrass.
Well, the others have been, yes.
For comedy.
All right,
yeah.
for comedy.
Just, you know, we're on TV, and I don't want people to go away. Anyway.
What year of your life did you get really good at the banjo? It's always
been really good twice. Once was early on when I was a young man, and I was playing on stage, and I was playing along with the Nitty Gritty Dirt Band. I wasn't in their band, but I played with them. And then I sort of put it on the back burner, and then I got good again in the 21st century.
Do people still express amazement that you can be good at more than one thing in life?
Well, you know, a lot of people are good at more than one thing. You know, many people are musicians and poets, so I don't really take any extra credit for that.
But those who've read your books, the people who've read your essays for The New Yorker, can't for a minute think you're a dilettante, that you're screwing around in other industries besides your core comedy.
Well, I take everything very seriously. I don't feel like I'm screwing around. I really do take the time and work hard on things.
What has surprised me has been your Twitter feed.
That I don't work so hard on.
No, because I think because I've always regarded you as an entertainer who, when the program is over, you live a fairly private life. You know, people never hear about you being escorted out of a club at 3 o'clock in the morning.
I can't believe they don't report that.
Yeah, I know. It's the Bouncers Network.
Yeah.
But you live fairly publicly on Twitter.
Well, I almost never say anything private on Twitter. Everything I say there is a fantasy or made up, or some story that's made up about me that I make up.
What do you like about it?
I don't know. It's been an outlet for comedy. I thought it was going to be promotional, and it ended up just being an outlet for humor.
Does it challenge you every day?
Well, I don't do it every day anymore, but it is a challenge. Sometimes, you know, when I worked in live television, I always thought, you know, when I worked on the Smothers Brothers, there was a show a week, and sometimes just the spontaneity of it got things out of you that were funnier than if you thought about it for a month. And that's what Twitter is like. It's very spontaneous, and you know, if you blow it one time, there's always tomorrow.
Let's talk about this instrument.
Sure.
What's the history? Why was it invented as opposed to the guitar? Obviously, it has a very unique, rich sound.
Why was it invented, or why did I take it up?
What's the derivation of the banjo?
Well, its roots are in Africa. and then it came over to America, and then it was transformed. It was a gourd instrument, then it was transformed into this.
You've been gesticulating with your picks on for several minutes, which leads me to believe you came prepared to, as they say in Hollywood,
you never know,
play us off with something.
Well, I brought, this is not actually a bluegrass banjo. This is what they call a clawhammer banjo, but I have my picks on to show you the two different styles of playing the banjo. And one is called three-finger scrug style, to be played like this in three-finger. And here's the same song played in clawhammer style. It's played without picks, and it's a little more melancholy.
That's a little more Ken Burns. Dear Mama, the fighting at Antietam has grown severe, and my foot rot has grown equally severe. But that's a much gentler sound.
It can be, or it can be, you know. So it's all over the place. It's just two different styles. But they're important styles for the five-string banjo.
Thank you for visiting us.
My pleasure.
Steve Martin, ladies and gentlemen. We'll take a break. When we come back here tonight, see, isn't that nice? It just makes life better. It's been a holiday on ice for 75 years, right outside our back window. A few things you might not have known about the Rock Center skating rink when we come back.
Winter comes to New York, and in the sunken garden of the Rockefeller Center, it's the gentle scrape of steel on ice, overshadowed by the towering skyscrapers.
That great voice of the newsreel from the 30s. Here we are, present day, easily the most famous skating rink in the entire world. Opened in 1936, which must mean a big birthday this year. It is 75 years old. What a gorgeous spot to be. It's a cold December night, but not too bad. And it's important to look back at the history of this place. It was opened simply as an attraction to bring people here to Rockefeller Center to eat, to shop. It was built originally as a temporary structure. They didn't think they were going to keep it here, but the crowds kept coming, so they kept it here. And at first, 1936, 1937, for the first 2 years of the rink, they had 2 trees, and try as we might to look through the research, we could never find out why, but the idea went away. It's been one Christmas tree ever since. We found some ads in the newspaper in 1936. They promise a 50-cent lunch menu. That is no longer available, but the hot toddies mentioned in the newspaper are. It is still one of the great places on earth, one of the most popular attractions here in New York. We are very proud to call it home. That is our broadcast for tonight. For all the good people who worked hard to bring it to you, we'll be back the night after Christmas with a brand new broadcast. Thank you and good evening from New York. Your late local news begins now.